City Council Committee of the Whole will meet on Monday, May 23rd, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. for the purpose of meeting with the Superintendent of Schools for a presentation to update the City Council on the Salem Public Schools. This meeting shall be held as a hybrid meeting. Councilors shall meet in person while members of the public shall participate remotely in accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and as amended by Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. The subcommittee meetings are held to take action for the purpose of making recommendations to the full council. Individuals may participate remotely in the meeting via a remote participation platform called Zoom. Members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting may access the remote participation meeting through any one of the following ways. Please click the link found in the agenda, password 816-504, or telephone 877-853-5257 or 888-475-4499. The webinar ID is 879-9096-7940. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so on matters not requiring a public hearing, we will post on the City of Salem's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. The City Council Committee of the Whole met in City Council chambers on May 23rd, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the matters listed below. Notice of this meeting was posted on May 18th, 2022 at 3:33 p.m. And tonight we are meeting with the Superintendent of Schools to give an update on the Salem Public Schools. Absent today are Councilor Riccardi, Prosnewski, and Dominguez. Joining us remotely is Councilor Merkel. And with us tonight is Superintendent Dr. Zreich and School Committee Member Mary Manning. So the superintendent had asked me if he could come to the City Council and give us a presentation and update us on the public schools and the programs that are happening and all the great stuff that they're doing in the schools. And so I wanted to have this meeting before the budget hearing started, just so that we can get an idea of what types of things are going to be in the budget. I will remind the council members that we don't really have any sort of ability to say where they can and can't spend their money. We accept their budget or decrease it by a certain percentage, but we don't tell them how they can spend their money. But that being said, welcome to Dr. Zreich, who will be doing a presentation.
Thank you for having me here this evening. I'm going to try to speak in this microphone. I do want to thank Ms. Manning, who's here, and so any questions I can't answer, she'll be able to answer all the questions I can't answer. But I do want to thank the rest of the school committee as well for their support, and certainly through this budget process and over the last 2 years. Hard to believe that now I'm rounding my second year here during a very interesting time, but looking forward to what I hope will be a quieter school year next year. But we have a lot to I have a lot to share tonight. I wanted to share some thoughts for about 15, 20 minutes, and then give you a chance to ask questions, and certainly would love your ideas. And I also welcome you at any time to visit our schools. Would love to give you tours of programs that we have, if anything strikes your fancy from my comments here tonight. So if you could go to the next slide. We've recently gone through a process to identify a new district logo and value statements for the school district, which we think are particularly aligned to this moment in time. I guess we have, yep. They also have it in front of them, but. So I'll just keep talking when you guys figure it out. That's no problem. But we have three core values: belonging, equity, and opportunity. And those are, we underwent a year-long process with the community to identify those as our core values as a school system. The school committee weighed in as well, and we developed a new logo for the school system, which you can see in front of you, that takes into account those three values. We really, we believe in, that in social justice and inclusive school community where all members are engaged, and we tried to show that with the different students that are there. We believe that we should have many different opportunities for young people, and they can receive a personalized experience. This is a nice logo, but this isn't our logo right now. But and then finally, especially during this time, our young people felt very disconnected from the experience in schools. We also highlight belonging as something that's really important to us. So, all right, there we go. So those are our three, thank you. Those are our three core values that we have now anchored ourselves in. And as a school system, we want to make decisions around, with these values grounding and anchoring our work. You can go to the next slide. Mentioned equity. About a year ago, the school committee wrote an equity statement that really reflected how important in this moment in time it was for us to develop systems and programs and experiences that were really about all kids. And I know that that's tossed around quite a bit, but when we say all kids, we really mean that. And that as a school system, we want to make sure that we're disrupting inequities, that are long-term inequities that exist for certain groups more than others. And so you can see that reflected in this equity statement. This statement appears in every school office in our district right now, and we're getting better at making decisions as a school district around this language, and so that these words actually have meaning. And I hope you'll get to see some of that both through this presentation and our budget decisions that we made for the FY23 budget. Go to the next slide. We have four strategic priorities and a series of initiatives that are aligned to those priorities. These were developed last spring and are part of what is a 2-year strategic plan that was built off of the 5-year plan that I inherited when I came, which I thought was a very strong plan, and I didn't want to blow it up, but rather we made it a 2.0 plan, given that it was in the middle of the pandemic. And so we're committed to 4 things. 1, making sure we have the best educators and leaders in front of our children. Second, when we talk about excellence and academic excellence for all students, that's our core work as a school system, an academic institution. The third is, and certainly in this moment, the idea of developing strong support systems, mental health, behavioral, and social emotional supports for both for our students, and also engaging our families. And finally, how do we become a more strategic and accountable school system to the public that we serve? And I'll go through the different initiatives related to these 4 priorities in a moment. You can go to the next slide. Around the best educators and leaders, this is one of our finest educators, who's the Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. Actually, standing next to her is one of her former students from Bowditch who works for the Red Sox. And as a PR, and she didn't realize that when she was called it by the Red Sox. It was one of her former students, and she just appeared on the field to throw out at the first pitch a few weeks ago. And there are, around this work, we're as a system, we're committed to diversification of our workforce. Right now, we have 6% of our staff or teachers are teachers of color, and we're hoping to move the needle even just a little bit over the next 2 years. We have a lot of work to do, but a big part of our work is how do we continue to make sure that we have staff, school leaders, district leaders who look like the children that we serve and the demographics of the Salem Public Schools. A part of that work is also making sure that our teaching is culturally and linguistically responsive. We've done a lot of work this year with an organization called the Equity Imperative, which is we've had common conversations across all of our schools and departments around race and equity. And there's a series of modules and discussions that all of our leaders or all of our school staff has been trained in. While we have more work to do, the fact that we're having conversations about what the impact that race has in what happens in schools, and that we're looking at data specific to Salem, this organization took our performance data and our academic and our non-academic metrics and to show where some of the inequities lie for our community, not about some, not decontextualized, but rather focused on where we succeed and where we struggle as a school system. The third part of this work is really, if we want the best leaders in this system, people want to know that they'll have the autonomy to lead change in their schools. I don't believe that change happens from the district office, from my office. It happens at the school level. The agents of change are in school districts, are school-based teams, not the superintendent. As much as people want to think that that's an important role, real action happens at the school level, and that's a shift for many school districts, and it is for Salem, about how do we make sure people who want to be principals want to know that they'll have the ability to influence change in their own buildings and in their own community. We want to invest in instructional leadership teams, parent leadership teams, so that decisions are not just held at the district level, where people certainly will not own improvement in the same way as if it's coming from the school level. So that's an important part of our work, and has been a part of our work as we build the muscle of our school-based teams to really lead change at their schools. Next slide. Next big priority and initiatives are around academic excellence. And this is the work that I got into education to do. And the first is, as you know, we have invested a tremendous amount in pre-K and early childhood over the last year. This has been an enormous amount of work to open pre-K classrooms, 4-year-old classrooms at Bates and Horace Mann, and really to rebrand the Early Childhood Center here, that we have more full-day programs. We have, we know parents are asking for full-day, full-year programs. We used to just have half-day experiences for folks. And so we've more than doubled the number of full-day pre-K seats over the last year. And not only is it about access to, the quantity, but it's more importantly, it's about quality. And we've invested in new curriculum materials. We've hired, we took one of our strong coaches, and he's now working just with early childhood teachers in the district. We've invested in professional development with Salem State. And we've also invested in our community-based partners. And I want to be clear, this isn't about Salem Public Schools owning all the pre-K space. This is about us working also with community-based partners. And so we've used some of our ESSER, or as you got the ARPA dollars, the federal dollars, to also subsidize 3 of our community partners. And our coach works also with those programs. We've also they've used the funding to elevate their salaries, make it more competitive to what teachers make. And that's work that we will continue to double down on. We're not expanding into next year. The one thing we are adding is a after-school component to the early childhood program, which we haven't had this year. And we are looking to figure out a sustainable way to fund early childhood beyond when the ESSER or ARPA dollars go away in a few years. I can't stress number 2 enough, developing independent learners. That's what I want for my own children. I want our children to be able to think, write, speak for themselves. And when I go into classrooms, I think the first thing I look for is the cognitive demand of what we ask our young people to do. They need to be pushed and challenged in a supportive way, but the learning has to be turned over to them. And among the most anti-racist things we can do as a school system is provide our young people with complex tasks and experiences that prepare them to be able to think on their feet. I think of my own children. I want them to be able to write, speak with purpose. I want them to be able to articulate a point of view, be able to defend it. That's what I want all our kids to be able to experience in our classrooms. And that's what true engagement, in my opinion, looks like when they're wrestling complex problems and situations, and there's relevancy to what they're learning as students. Finally, the high school is another a big bucket of work that we've been focused on as a school system. I'll show some data on that in a moment. But how do we better engage our young people and give them options to be successful in both college and career? A few years ago, if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would say we need to prepare everyone for college. Now I would tell you we need to prepare everyone for college and or career. And there's no shame in going into career when there's a lot of opportunities for young people to do very well, but they should have the option. They should have choices, and we should be preparing them to leave Salem High School with a choice. Next slide. Around engaging students and families, we feel strongly that our students need to have a voice. Just last week, we had the opportunity, we have a student voice project with the equity imperative partners we have in our 4 secondary schools, or 5 secondary schools. The students did research projects on things that they want changed in their school. They talked about mental health. They talked about issues around race in their own buildings. The lunch food. The food was a topic, not surprisingly, something they wanted to change at Collins Middle School. And we heard loud and clear from our young people about what they want for their education. We have to find more opportunities for that in our school system. And I don't think we've, I say that when I say we, I mean as a field in education, not Salem. I don't think we've listened enough to the voices of the real clients and consumers, which are our kids. Around that work, the young people are telling us after the pandemic, we have to have stronger social, emotional, and mental health supports for students. This has been a struggle because we could hire, dozens of counselors. We just don't have, there's just not enough people for what the need is right now. Our young people are struggling, and I do worry about their mental health. I do think a lot of it, though, is about what happens in classrooms can either support or exacerbate that. And if school is boring and disengaging, you're going to have more mental health and social emotional issues. You can't divorce what happens in classrooms every day from the supporting the mental health and social emotional needs of young people. Yes, there are some young people with some very significant acute issues that we're fortunate to have a lot of resources in Salem, but in this moment in time, our students need much more than what we've given them historically in public schools. And then finally, our families. I do think in the Salem Public Schools, we have a very engaged group of families that are typically represent the white middle-class families. We do not have strong engagement from our families of color and our families that have historic, a lot of our newcomer families, our bilingual families. We have to do better in this area. We did hire, many of you know Laura Assad, who used to work in the city. She is leading our family engagement efforts that has already begun to pay dividends so that our families have somebody that they can connect with. We are incentivizing now teachers to be bilingual. We have an $1,000 incentive in our contract and we're hoping to negotiate now in all of our contracts. If you're bilingual and you pass a test, you can get an extra $1,000 stipend. We also now have a full-time district interpreter and translator who provides interpretation and translations at all our events. The graduations, for instance, at Salem High have never been interpreted this year for the first time that I don't know if Harry Manning would know better than I, but I know last year they weren't interpreted. Now we will have somebody that can provide that. Sure.
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Streich. Thank you.
No, that's okay.
Just with regards to translation services, is this particularly around spoken word, or are we also now able to offer American Sign Language?
We contract with somebody to do American Sign Language, and we have had someone do sign language at the graduation. The person we have is Spanish translation, but we do interpretation. But we do contract to do sign language in other languages as well, and we are also training staff. So when the $1,000 goes for any language, so hopefully we're building a cadre. And sign language would also. I guess that's your question, whether we would absolutely we would incentivize somebody who can sign language as well. So, next slide. And then just this is the less exciting but no less important is just our planning, how we allocate resources. We have to be more strategic in how we allocate resources. Ms. Manning is the head of our finance committee. We've tried to get more strategic in aligning our resources to our priorities, making sure that we're hearing the voices of our school leaders around what they're looking for and trying to leverage for their schools. You'll hear a little more about how we're monitoring we need to better progress monitor as a school system and report out on how we're doing. Sometimes we're not going to be doing as well as we wanted to, but that's still important that there's transparency and reporting out of progress. And then we should be celebrating when we do hit the marks and meet some of our progress goals. And then we as a school system, we are trying to get better at having clean and accurate data in the moment. We just launched an internal dashboard where we can start, or not just at the beginning of the school year, where I can see our leaders in schools can see live data and updated data on attendance, on suspensions, on our dropouts, the number of dropouts in real time. And we hope to be able to move some of that to be live on our district website. Some of it obviously is covered by privacy laws, but that so people can see some of in real time where we are as a school system around key data points. Next slide. So again, this is, I mean, I think as educators, we do a lot around inputs, and we as a system need to spend more time and output. And that's sort of a mantra that we've been sharing as a school system is we do a lot of stuff. Schools are famous for doing a lot of stuff, but that doesn't always lead to better outcomes. And I know I need to be pushed to be more narrow, to be more focused, and so that we can make sure that the time we do put in is maximizing outcomes. So this next set of slides is really looking at some of our data and our outcomes as a school system. Next slide. These are our metrics. These are our district goals, and I'm not going to read these all to you. You have them on the slide. There's two slides of these where I'll just quickly run through. We care about the percent of educators and staff who represent the racial. We're committed to creating more high-quality pre-K seats in the system. And these are over this school year and next school year. We want to reduce student chronic absenteeism, which I can tell you right now got hit very hard. There's no way we're meeting this goal after COVID this year. Reducing disproportionality of suspensions and days of suspension by subgroup. We do an annual survey, a panorama survey for students and staff around different aspects of their school. And one of the things we do ask is about learning about and discussing and confronting issues of race and ethnicity. You can go to the next slide. We want to increase the percentage of Salem residents who attend the Salem Public Schools. That's a goal that we set. And then we have a series of high school outcomes, which are related to graduation rates, dropout rates, and then access to advanced coursework, which advanced coursework is APs, early college classes, career technical classes that are aligned to industry standards. And yeah, that's the bulk of it. But we want to see more and more of our young people. And that data point is for juniors and seniors who have access to advanced coursework. You can take advanced coursework as freshmen and sophomores, but the state looks at the data point from the state is for juniors and seniors. And then we want to look at overall performances measured by MCAS. You'll note that MCAS is the last of the data points. It's not that I don't think MCAS is important, but I do think we need to redefine what success. MCAS is one data point of success. There are a lot of other ways to assess and judge the success of a school or a school district that are not only about MCAS. I think it's one important piece, but as you can see, there's a lot of other ways that we've defined what success looks like. Next slide. This is our year-long trajectory of how we look at progress in the Salem Public Schools. We started this year, and we have school improvement plans, and we have district improvement plans. All of that can be found on our website. So you can actually see each school's improvement plan, and you can also see, I think there's one missing, but all of our district improvement plans mapped out to the initiatives that I just went over 5 minutes ago. And around December, January, we did step backs with our schools to really look at their progress or lack of progress in different areas. So we talked about, we looked at their where they were mid-year, and we made some adjustments, and we had the schools reflect on their performance and their outcomes at that point. And then that also informed our budget process. That launched us into the budget process, which really started in earnest in January and helped shape the budget priorities that you'll see when I present our budget to you in a couple of matter of weeks. So that's how we reflect and monitor progress as a school system. We hope to do it again next year and even get better at this work in the upcoming school year. Next slide. All right, so attendance. So in the upper right-hand corner of these slides, we label things red, yellow, green. So if it's red, that means we predictably did not do as well as we wanted to, and yellow means we're so-so toward our goal, and then green is obviously we're on pace. So attendance, we've been slammed with attendance issues. It was looking okay until January, and then things really went south. It's really hard to assess. I will say Salem Public Schools had a serious attendance problem. Very serious. I think some of that is contributed by the fact that we don't have neighborhood schools contributes a little bit to that for sure. But the numbers, I was in a receivership before here. Our attendance in Holyoke is better than Salem's attendance pre-pandemic. That's a concern. Hard for kids to learn if they're not in school. And that should, so but I can't really look at this data right now because we've had in the same way I normally would because of just the number of what illness did to our schools all year long. So this is tough to really delineate too much. Although directionally, that's something we have to get better at. I'm not sure chronic absenteeism will ever be the same after COVID. But what we do want to see is that it gets better. We're also going to have to learn to live with the virus moving forward, and we need kids in school. So anyway, that's just one of the data points I wanted to share. There's a lot of information there that you're welcome to look at, but and I just have it through April. I don't have it as of yet. Next slide. So this is around, but it's not only about attendance when we talk about engagement. This is Salem High School, so you can look at their attendance. Believe it or not, their current attendance is better than it was in 18-19. And it's still not very good at all. 89% is not good. 89 on a test maybe doesn't look so bad, but 89% with attendance, when you look at the numbers, is not very good at all. You would expect to see schools closer to 90, at least a minimum 92. I'd like to see schools at 95% attendance. So chronic absenteeism means that you missed 10% or more of the days in a school year. So you're chronically absent if you missed 18 days or more. We have 180 days in a school year. So we obviously have a lot of work to do. The dropout rate, this is Salem High. We're on a good track right now for this current school year. That's why this is green, because we're in a good place for the high school dropout. We have a very high dropout rate as compared to other communities, and it's particularly low for our English language learners. I think we have 10% of our English language learners have dropped out historically over the last few years. That is an alarming number of students. I mean, when you look at 10 students, that doesn't seem like a lot. And remember, that doesn't include New Liberty, which is a school that gets kids who are overage and underaccredited. But we're on overall a good track. But any student who drops out as you can imagine, if you don't get your high school diploma right now, the consequences are even greater than they're much greater than they've ever been. That's a data point that we track very carefully. Our suspension rate at the high school level is much improved this year compared to prior years. Last year, I wouldn't use 0.8%. We didn't have kids in school very often last year. But compared to historical numbers at the high school, we've seen improvements. We do have a higher rate at the middle school level, which is a concern right now. If you ask me, we're concerned around discipline. And sometimes suspension is needed, but there are also alternatives that we need to explore. And there's an opportunity to really use more restorative practices as a school system. I can go to the next slide. Again, this is very encouraging numbers, is the engagement level around our vocational programs. The CTE programs are booming at Salem High School. We have a new director. Mr. Burns has made this a priority for the school as well. We have more kids who are enrolling in our CTE programs, and we have more students who are continuing on a vocational track. I see this as a very healthy sign. Our budget proposal that you'll be seeing in a few weeks does invest in more positions for the CTE programs, for culinary, an extra automotive teacher, support in the electrical shop. We're seeing, I think, about 40 to 50, I think it's almost 50% of students are electing to at least try vocational programs. So I'd like to invest in our programs rather than send kids to Essex Tech over time. I'd love to continue to expand our programming because and kids are responding to it because the kind of learning, we talk about independent learners, they want to be, I mean, our CTE programs by definition allow kids to have more hands-on project-oriented experiences, which our young people are responding to. So we have to be responsive to that need. So that's also what I don't have here is our sports numbers are way up at Salem High School this year as well, which is a good sign. While our teams, it's not all about teams, but I mean, our wins and losses, while they may not be winning, winning, I should say, we do have many more students engaged in our after-school programs, including sports, as well as our JRRTC program as well. Next slide. So this is some interesting data about, remember I talked a little bit about the climate and culture question related to race. You know, the question about how often, you can see the example questions that relate to how often do you have conversations about race in your school. And you can see while it was pretty flat or was flat in grades 3 to 5, we saw a significant increase in grades 6 to 12 about the percentage of students who are reporting that there are conversations in their school about racism and bias and culture and ethnicity in their schools. So that's a positive trend. I have it as a yellow in the corner because we're pretty flat in grades 3 to 5, but in grades 6 to 12, we saw improvement. We're doing this survey again next week, so we'll get a fresh data point around how students, students' responses to these questions. Next slide. Here's some data on academics. We just, for the first time in a few years, we have an assessment that isn't the MCAS that we use as a school system. It's an internal assessment that we use not to beat people over the head with, but rather to inform on progress, and it can look at growth. And so you can see reading and math. What we want to see is 50% more growth, 50% or higher growth at each grade level. And you can see we struggle more at grades 6, 7, 8. I'm a little cautious about the 10th grade because I'm not sure exactly how many kids took the assessment in grade 10. I think it's much more reliable looking in grades 3 to 8. We do ask, this is an online assessment, doesn't take very long, it's adaptive, and it gives us information. We can see growth from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year. So what you want to do is you want to see a 50% percentile. And so we're close, but that's why that's a yellow, because in some grades we're seeing some important gains, in other places not as strong, both reading and math. Next slide. So this is not about growth. This is about meeting or exceeding benchmarks. This is the same assessment. It's the STAR assessment. And you can see here, again, there's a lot of information on this slide, but we give the assessment in grades. We have an early literacy version, which you can see there. And then which we saw important gains from the beginning. This is from the beginning to the middle of the year. And then you can see all the other grade levels. In reading as a district, we had a 3% increase from beginning to middle of the year. In math, we had a 5% increase. And the bar shifts, so it's not the same assessment. This is a nationally normed assessment. So the fact that we're seeing positive gains is a good sign, because the assessment is getting harder as the year goes on. And it is predictive of the MCAS. And so it does gives us some early information. What's most important about this data is teachers get reports and parents can get reports. Still working on how that will play out, but about how their child is progressing, and will give information about what interventions a child might need in math or English language arts in real time. And you can give it multiple times. We ask every child to take it beginning, middle, and end of the year, but there's you can also do progress monitoring throughout the year as well. Next slide. And so this is some high school data around academics as well. You can see our advanced coursework numbers. We're at 55% of our students enrolled in advanced coursework this school year, and I hope that number to go higher next year. And then early college, you can see the growth, which has been substantial in early college. That should really say early college or dual enrollment. The difference is dual enrollment are individual courses that kids take that are not bundled in any way. Early college is actually a bundle of courses that we have a designation with Salem State. So if you're in the early college program, that means that you are taking a bundle of, I think, you get 12 credits junior and senior year that are all linked together, and you're part of that specific program. But students can also take dual enrollment classes with Salem State on their own, or they can go to North Shore Community College and take classes as well. And so you can see that the number of young people taking early college classes or college courses has grown. And at the end of the day, I have to say, I have these conversations with people my age all the time who have kids. Everybody gets very obsessive about APs because that was the gold standard when I was in school, right? If I could pick, I would have my child take as many college courses as I could in high school because the credit means something. AP doesn't mean anything. Even if you get a 5 on an AP exam, it doesn't have the same weight as it used to. But if you have meaningful credits, and especially in the state of Massachusetts, they can transfer to other schools in Massachusetts, and a lot of private colleges will take them as well. That's real. That represents dollars. That represents savings for families who are first-time college goers, that they're leaving Salem High School with credits. And I think that's huge. I mean, again, when kids cross the stage at Salem High, I would hope that they have the Diploma Plus. And Diploma Plus means you have college credits, you have a workplace certificate, you may have a seal of biliteracy because you've taken a test that says you're bilingual and biliterate. I mean, those are stackable credentials that really market you well when you're leaving our high school for both for college and for career. That to me is a lot more meaningful than if you've taken honors or AP courses in today's world to be competitive in the state of Massachusetts. Next slide. So just this is my last slide, I promise. Just a couple of reflections. We as a district, we want to work to make progress more transparent. I'll try to share some data with you quickly here tonight. I think when I say we here, again, I mean as a profession, we really need to rethink what success really means. I think the pandemic has pushed us. I think I'm having a mid-career crisis and rethinking. I was always on the edge of reform as an educator. And I'm not sure I think the same thing about what success means, especially as I look at the state of our world and I look at what young people need to be successful. I think we need to shift some of what success means. I'm not sure. I mean, I think the MCAS is one data point, but it shouldn't be what we become obsessed about when we think about what young people, and you never would have gotten me to say that 10 years ago. But I think we need to evolve as a profession, much like other professions need to. And I think there's an urgency to innovate. I think schools need to look differently moving forward. I'm really worried about the middle school level. Part of this is my office is in the 6th grade wing at Collins. I say this all the time. I have a 6th grader at home. But I will tell you, in visiting schools, the age group that's struggling the most is middle school. It's not even close, in my opinion. At our high school, we offer so much. There's a lot of things that young people can choose from. And during the pandemic, they had a lot more autonomy, flexibility. And our young students, they were cared. They had to be cared for. Like, you couldn't leave them alone. So there was somebody there with them. Middle school kids did not have that. They were left alone a lot of times. That includes my own child. And their world was their phone, technology. They didn't have the opportunities to engage socially that they desperately need. What I see outside of my office is they're not doing things they're not doing bad things. What they do is they want to be with each other. They want to socialize. And school is not exactly the most exciting place for them. And I think And unless we do something, I think, dramatically different about the experience of middle school, I just worry a lot about those kids being the most impacted by the pandemic from a social and emotional standpoint. So that's something that I'm wrestling a lot with as a district leader as we head into next year. I think we all anticipated it, but to see it, I think that's where a lot of our attention needs to go. I think as a school system, we have to surface the voices of our most marginalized community members. I think that's something we have to work harder to do as a school system. And one thing I will tell you is what I hear from parents of our some of our newcomer families, what they want from schools is not the same thing what some of our longtime Salem families necessarily want from schools. The ideas and what their experiences. If you went to school in the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico, it looks a whole lot different than what, you know, I've had a lot of parents ask me, like, you don't have uniforms here. What's the deal? You know, we don't understand, you know, when the teacher's out in Puerto Rico, a lot of times you don't send kids to school. It's a very different, and their expectations of what school should be. But those conversations have to happen with more families and be more inclusive of different voices. And then finally, I think just social emotional supports are important, but they cannot be divorced from what happens in the classroom. Like when we create more engaging opportunities for kids and school is less boring for them, we're gonna have fewer issues around mental health and social emotional needs. Doesn't mean that it corrects everything, but if school can be a more dynamic and exciting place for young people, we're not gonna have the same, we'll have fewer challenges around social emotional needs. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Zreich. That was a lot that you presented there, lots of data. I'm going to open it up to the counselors for questions. Counselor Cohen.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Dr. Zreich, for coming. Two things. It's really impressive what the schools have been doing on equity and diversity for several years. I'm really excited to see that you're putting more focus on vocational. Our society at large, not just Salem, but everywhere, has a real deficiency of people in the trades, especially as things are transitioning to more renewable energy. The state of Massachusetts, the Clean Energy Center, is funding the Mass Save incentive program over 3 years, $3.5 billion. And the reason I bring that up is maybe there's some money for training that could be funneled, you know, into Salem. Company I worked for used to get money for paid interns. And I think the city has actually done that with the sustainability department. So hopefully that will be something that you can access. But I think it's a real, you know, opportunity for a lot of kids to maybe get into something that's pays well and fulfilling for them. That they may not, you know, we all grew up, as you were talking about us growing up, we all grew up thinking that you got to go to college and 4-year college and, you know, liberal arts and really didn't focus on trades as much as we probably need it now.
We have been in touch with the offshore wind folks already, our vocational programs as an example, but I couldn't agree with that more. And we're lucky in Salem to have those programs at our high school.
Councilor Varela.
Thank you, President Marcello. Through you to Dr. Zreich. Just want to make a comment about the career technical education program you have. After speaking with Mr. Sousa about it, I guess my one hesitation and reluctancy is what I'm a little worried about is me being a product of a regional occupational program in California. That was the only way I was actually engaged in public school. I just feel like for me, I didn't get that opportunity early enough. And from what I understand from your program, it's open to all all students, but it's not a requirement. And I really feel like if it was somewhat of a requirement just for a student to get their feet wet early on, that might open up more opportunities for children that they may be engaged in the future concerning a technical education. I would just like to make that, recommendation. I know it's, kind of sticky, but I just feel like some students don't really get the opportunity because they don't know it's there. But if it's a requirement, that might be a great opportunity. Thank you.
I think that's a really interesting point. That would be called like an exploratory that everybody would take as a freshman. So I think that's an interesting idea. I haven't thought about that. That's what they do at Six Tech as a required. As a required. But yeah, I think it's a point worth considering. And I also think moving exposure in middle school too is something to think about. Something we need to think more about as well.
Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Madam President. You mentioned about the junior high kids getting sort of, I guess, not forgotten about, but just struggling right now on the social emotional side. I think I can't speak from experience on that side, but as far as a parent of elementary kids, we're seeing that certainly after the pandemic, a lot of kids came back not the same as they left. And it's not the school's fault. It's not even the parents' fault. It's just the fact that these kids were sort of left on their own for a little while. And we've hit a point where I think there's, for sure, something you know about is there's disruptions happening in the classrooms. That's very difficult to control. I think we complain a lot about that in Salem, but talking to people outside of the district and friends that live in other communities, everybody's seeing very, very similar things happening at the elementary level and I'm sure above. Have you seen anything in other communities, I guess nationwide or statewide, that, because clearly something different, we need to look at things a little bit differently now, that others are doing that are working right now, or that a direction that things are going that may be sort of a solve for some of these issues?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a complicated question. Because some, we, especially when the students are younger, don't want to make decisions, dramatic decisions about what the right placement for a child is without exhausting different opportunities. But then, it does, at times, it can really impact what happens for everybody else in the classroom. The classroom being clear if somebody's having a challenging day or days. I think one of the things we have to look at is how do we create different spaces in schools where students can get extra therapeutic support in buildings. I worry a lot about, though, just creating like another space where people can be sent to, because that's not always the best thing. Becomes a dumping ground for people, for students who are struggling, but done well with like a true therapeutic model and component. I think more and more students need to access those. May not be every day, but it could be. I've never seen more kids. I think we always had students that had acute needs, but I think so many different students are having challenging days or periods of time, and that's something I really want to think about. Is how do we create more therapeutic spaces in all schools, not just like having a school that's a therapeutic school. But I want more children to remain in the general education. I don't love having. I'm glad we have an alternative high school, for instance. But the numbers of kids who really need it should not be at the numbers that I think communities are seeing kids need it. I think it speaks to each school having a better set of coordinated resources, supports for students that need more. That's what I've seen work. I think we're trying to build that here in a thoughtful way. So it's not just one school that has the behavioral that we have those supports in place at every school. So, go ahead. Oh, I don't know if I should be calling on people. I don't want to take your job. You were elected to do this work. I wasn't.
if I could just on a separate topic, if I could
Yes, sure.
ask a question around something that's on the minds of parents for sure is it seems to be a push to standardize across the schools because a lot of schools do things that are just slightly different from each other or wildly different in some cases. And there seems to be a movement to try to push towards some sort of standardization across schools so that we don't have differences. I guess if you could talk a little bit to the mindset around that, because I get from at least from a parent's perspective, I look at it and I think, this is an opportunity for schools to try things out at a small level, where if it fails at Salts, at least it hasn't failed district wide. If it's successful at Bentley, then maybe we can try it at Carleton or wherever. Can you talk just a little bit to that, if that's a fair assessment of the direction, or if so, what's the mindset behind it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure I would I don't think I wouldn't characterize as that's a movement that we have as a district. I think we are trying to better figure out, though, what we hold tight as a district and what should be left to be, where there should be autonomy at the school level. I talked a little bit about school leaders having, or in communities having autonomy. I think there's a little bit of, I think that's something we need to have more conversations with as a school district, because I do believe that there should be the opportunity to innovate at the school level and have autonomy to make some decisions and use resources in different ways. But for instance, like, I'm not sure that curriculum would be one of the places I would do that right now, just given that there's a lot of new teachers and new staff coming into the profession. And we do have kids that move around quite a bit, and having some standardized, at least a shell of some materials is important. But I think I think it's something we wrestle with, because I know that as a school leader, I wanted to have some autonomy, but then there's efficiencies you lose for sure. So I would tell you that's one of the conversations we're having as a summer, as a leadership team, is what do we hold tight as a school system? What do we, where do we give flexibility? And I do think, for instance, we have to be clear about in our budget process, right? I believe that there should be certain things every school should have, right? But then should be resources set aside. Schools should have some discretion to be able to do with those resources what they think is best for instance, you got to have a nurse. You have to have a nurse. You should have, and there's certain things we believe that there should be coaching in every school for teachers, right? Like, that's something we hold tight. But then our principals right now in schools don't have a lot of autonomy beyond that. I mean, they have some discretionary funding, but I think that's something we want to wrestle more with. What's the right balance of that? So I wouldn't characterize it as quite that. I know I've heard that. I think with the pandemic, there's been some, we've had to standardize some things because of that. But look at Carleton and Saltonstall have done some innovative things. I think Collins has been known for innovation that they've done over time. So we got to strike the right balance.
Councillor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you to Dr. Zreich. I have a number of questions, but I'm gonna try and keep it moving. I'll start with the comments you had made about the social emotional well-being of our students. You and I had a previous very brief conversation at an event that I want to recall for the public, which is that I had made a plea. First, let me say, I think that this system has done a fabulous job at having additional in-school support. I know that a number of my own personal students, friends, and himself have really benefited from that support. And I think that there are some teachers out there really doing what you had said, which is incorporate a lot of that social emotional into the curriculum and how they handle their classrooms, which I've been really happy to see. One of the, for lack of a better word, one of the gaps I think we could maybe address would be how we support parents supporting their kids with mental and emotional support. So, you and I had discussed having a mental health day is great, except that there are parents out there who don't know what that means for their kids, right? Or they don't know how to implement any kind of training or support or exercises or anything really to help their kids in partnership with the school system. So if there was, have you thought any further or could you think a little bit further about how to send home some kind of tricks of the trade, or exercises or approaches that you're taking in the classroom that may be translatable to days like that when there are hard days, at home, or if someone knows their kid is struggling, just so that there's sort of consistent approach.
Yeah, no, I would just echo, that we did have that conversation. You're absolutely right. I think we have sent a few different things home during the course of the year, but we need to be doing more. I also think it's an opportunity to offer workshops. Now that we have Zoom as a technology there, I do find that parents will want to engage in things that are, around, parents have come to us with multiple concerns, right, about anxiety for their children. Yeah. I think people would be, interested in offering more training and support through, even Zoom meetings or consultations with professionals that can help answer questions. Because I think where I see parents struggling the most right now is in that area. People aren't thinking about the academics, right? Not that they aren't concerned about the academics.
Yeah.
They're worried about their school phobic child, that's struggling with anxiety.
Yep.
A child that's wrestling with, and now that I'm a parent with, school age children too, I see it too. That's what you stress out most about, your child. So we need to be doing more. We just last year we just launched a new department of student supports, and that individual is going to be leading Collins Middle School next year, but we're going to be rehiring for that position, and I hope that that's a stronger component of what we offer.
Great, thanks. If I could continue, thanks, President Marcello. I think that there's a lot of community concern about the 460 students that have left the system over the last 2 years. And I think that this approach that you presented tonight is really great and mindfully done, and really community oriented. And I'm just wondering how you think that those efforts convert into a re-engagement plan. Or I think, it's really difficult, right? If someone leaves the system, it's tricky to kind of get them to come back. So I know it's a hard question to answer, but I'm wondering if you've thought through how that converts.
Well, I actually think we're not actually losing higher percentage of kids to other choices. The birth rates are significantly lower in 2015 than they were in 2010 in Salem. To the tune of 400 kids. So, actually percentage-wise, I think we're losing fewer kids to other choices. We just don't have as many school-age children living in the city. There was a little bit of a bump during the pandemic, which is not shocking. But I do think that there is, the number of school-age children has declined. So, but that not to say we need to be more attractive to families who are still making different choices for school. So, I hope that the opportunity to get out there and listen more to families. I haven't really had the opportunity to be out there as much as I would like. I think that's where you get the best information on why people are making those choices for their kids. And I commit to doing that, especially as things resume. Even I feel this spring has been great to start. I happen to see some. Saturday, I was my son's baseball game in Salem was playing on the field next door. I had a chance to be on the sidelines with Salem parents who had kids at Salem Academy, with kids at Collins, at different private schools. That was really helpful to listen to their perspectives, and we need to do more of that. I need to do more of that so I can get better informed why people are making the decisions that they are.
Thanks. In addition to the diversity trainings, if we go back to the sort of the first third of the deck, and we look at that diversity training and all of that sort of community sensitivity awareness, in addition to that training, how are you addressing some of I think this happens in all school systems, so let me just caveat by saying that there are some long-term educators, that may be a little slow to adjust to the new, or not be, maybe sometimes fall down on that, or not be consistent with the values that the system is now addressing and would like to reflect. And how do you handle that in a situation where we have a really strong union and we've got some, long-term teachers?
I have to say, the Salem Teachers Union have been really good partners. I've been really fortunate to work with that. They value this work, and it was embedded in our contract negotiation. So I feel fortunate that there's a commitment on their part also to work with us around these questions of diversity. Look, at the end of the day, there are people that need to go somewhere else, right? And I think I have to say that that's happened this year in a couple of situations where, you know, the values that we are moving forward with are not in line with some folks who want to, and that's fine. They can teach in another community, and that's happened. Also surfaced more issues around, I mean, there have been more, you know, kids are surfacing more. And other teachers are surfacing, or staff are, and had more HR conversations. That I expected that. When you start talking about issues of, you know, race and equity in schools, I think there's got to be hard conversations that happen. And ultimately, not everyone. I mean, look, I chose to come to Salem because I thought that my values were aligned with where the city and the mayor and the school committee wanted. But that's not necessarily true. I don't, you know, if that's not how you feel about our work in the Salem Public Schools, there's plenty of other school districts are working. So and those conversations are ongoing with people. But by and large, I think we have a team of people who are really committed to doing this work. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to work in Salem.
That's wonderful. One follow-on to that, which is how you talked a little bit earlier in the presentation around student empowerment. Is there a really clear and transparent vehicle for students to report concerns or concerning engagement with teachers?
Not enough. That's one of the learnings we've had this year. There isn't, and we're working on that. I think that is an important next step.
Great, thanks. And then one last question, I promise. With regards to the budget that'll be presented in a few weeks, and this may be just on me to do my homework, but I'm wondering, because I've not seen one before, is it presented with any kind of regional comparison data to better understand the compensation of senior leadership as well as principals and staff?
It has not been. It has not been. I mean, that's something I could certainly provide you. Probably not for the budget meeting coming, but in the past and other places, people have asked for that, and we can certainly get that to the city council if that's something you're.
I personally, being on ANF, I think it would be really helpful to the conversations, especially this year. We all know it's going to be a hard conversation. So I think it'll be informative. Thanks, Dr. Zreik.
Thank you. Let the record show, I need to go back a little bit, that Councilor Dominguez joined us at about 7:25, and he has a question right now. So go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Superintendent, for a great presentation. I had the opportunity to hear more of the presentation, which I think is very valuable and important, not only for us, but for the entire public to hear that things are doing a lot better in the school system. And I encourage you to continue to do so, because that's the only way we're going to overcome a lot of rumors out there in regard that many staff and children and other things happen in the school system. So by you being out there, I think that will clarify most of the people point on regard. I got two questions to ask you, for you, Madam Chair. You mentioned on your presentation about the diverse staff that you want to see, because at this point we have a very low representation, and your vision is to see more diverse teachers specifically. And I know that, in fact, nationwide, it's a big challenge right now to attract new and qualified teachers to come to any district. Do you have any plan to beat those cities and towns that are in the same position that we are right now, to try to bring some diverse teachers to the school system? That's my first question.
So yes, my plan is not to compete with them, because we're all going to be fighting for the same people. So my plan is to develop our plan is to develop from within, right? We have a lot of, we're fortunate in Salem to have a lot of diversity within our student population, our community population. And what's one of the blessings of the pandemic is that there is more flexibility in emergency waivers and emergency licensures, which allows people who have a bachelor's interested in teaching to come into the profession you couldn't before. So that affords us much more flexibility to hire a more diverse workforce in certain positions. I also believe in developing our paraprofessionals, which is a much more diverse group of staff in our district. Many who live in Salem, they have kids in the school system. We need to be investing in them. And then one of our vocational programs at Salem High is an early childhood program. We do not do a good enough job of linking them to higher ed and then coming back to the Salem Public Schools to work and that's a very diverse group of students as well. We also have an incentive built into our contract that if you're a Salem graduate, you get a bump up in the pay scale automatically. That was intended to incentivize people from Salem to come back and work. Just everybody's looking for the same thing. So, I mean, we're not going to win out. If somebody's from Lynn, they're going to, be more connected to their hometown. So we've got to do a better job of getting our own, growing our own people, growing. And I think we have parents, recent graduates, and then I think our own students are a place for us to consider. So, and you had a second question, Counselor? Yes.
Mine is before I ask you the second question, I want to comment quickly on trade school, vocational school. I think that's a great thing to do. However, I feel that we need to promote it more. I mean, there's few parents and families who actually know that we have an options. I can speak out from my own experience. I have 7 children, probably very proud that they say that they all went to public school. My baby one just graduating this month. And I want to thank you publicly for your effort and your leadership, because that helped a lot my kids to be graduating from Salem High. But I have other children, my own family, which they choose not to continue to school. And I don't think they took advantage of any of the program that Salem School had in the trade school. So I think that the program needs to be more strongly advertised. And I agree with Councilor Varela that need to be a mandate, not a mandate, a part of the curriculum, so people can choose and they know that they have an option. If they don't want to pursue education through college, they can have a vocational degree. So my question to you is also similar to what I asked you before. Do you have in mind any plan? By the way, I see the numbers growing. I think this year we double the people the students that involved in the trade school. But I wanted to see more effort to see if we can really provide that option to the student and also expand to more professional. Can you mention in the same answer, what is the program that we have at this point in place? And if you have any intention to add more programs, so the family of the resident of Salem can hear you directly, that we have an option here locally in Salem High School.
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, we have to do a better job of marketing what we offer. I'm stunned by how many people come into Salem High and they say, "Oh, we didn't know you had all these programs, your technical programs." So I think we need to have more open houses for people to come in and see programs. The other thing we have to build up is there is a advisory board to our vocation. Every vocational program has to have an advisory board. Our new director is really trying to beef up the advisory board to have alumni, more local businesses. The last meeting, the second meeting we had this spring, we had a huge turnout. And the more community folks that know what we offer, it can sell and help promote promote the programs we do have. I think we're trying to get better connected with some of the unions as well, the laborers union, the carpenters union, to be able to make connections there. We also want to open up the restaurant again. The Salerno has the automotive. We have a teacher now who's really interested in servicing people's cars during the day. I mean, all of those things go a long way to highlighting. I think those probably did exist here at one time. And then, I think, eroded at some point. I'd also love to have a new facility that has state-of-the-art, CTE programs. I mean, I know, thank you for your support in moving forward our interest application for a new high school facility. We'll see where that goes. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, look, Essex Tech has amazing facilities, but we have great programming there too. And if people got to see what I get to see when I go there, kids are super engaged. They're excited. While they may not be the state-of-the-art shops, there's great opportunity to be better connected to the business community and the local, and provide young people with internships, co-ops, externships. Those are all things that are, I think, and our kids sell themselves once they go out in the community. They say they're from Salem High School. I have no doubt that that's part of our promotion of our program.
Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez, are you all set? Or do you have
I'm all set. Thank you so much.
Councilor Merkel, do you have any questions?
Excuse me. No, I don't have any particular questions. Thank you, President Marcillo. I do want to thank our superintendent for the wonderful presentation. It was very informative, and I do appreciate the focus on equity, focusing on all students being heard, being supported, and as the other counselors had said, appreciate the efforts to be made with more diversity in the staffing of the schools, teachers, and staff support. I think those are all really, really great great goals that you've set. I like the way you spelt out in your graphics exactly, the markers that you want to meet. Attendance is really challenging, especially through COVID. I can't even imagine how to tackle that. But I appreciate, I really appreciated the presentation and all the ideas expressed. And thank you for all the hard work and the teachers and the staff and by you through the really challenging times we've had, especially the last couple of years. And I appreciated the presentation. Thank you.
Councilor McLean.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Dr. Zreich, for being here, and Committee Member Manning. That's a lot of feedback. I wanted to ask you, we've covered some of this ground already, but I wanted to ask you about the social and emotional learning capacity. It's really clear from listening to you speak and looking at the presentation that there's been a lot of energy poured into improving equity outcomes in the schools. And you talked a little bit about some of the goal setting you have around that. You talked about looking to, increase the percentage of linguistically and culturally diverse staff. Really glad to hear you put an emphasis just now on creating bridges for those paraprofessionals and those other support folks who already have a higher degree of diversity within their ranks. And frankly, that's an equity issue in and of itself. And so I think addressing that is smart, helps to retain people, shows people their value. And you talked about putting in the sort of cash incentive for people who can bring greater linguistic skills to the table. So I want to ask how you are likewise incentivizing people to bring greater social, emotional capacity to the jobs that they already have. I think that there tends to be an approach historically where it's like, we'll provide some therapy and this is a place where we can put you for a portion of the day to give you these support services. And when I hear you talking about equity, what I hear is an understanding that there needs to be a more holistic approach, right? You need to have a body of people that can deliver for the kids at any time in every place. So I'm interested in getting there on the social and emotional level as well. And I'm wondering how you are incentivizing that and encouraging your staff to walk through those doors in terms of being able to bring that capacity right into the classroom.
That's a great question. We are thinking a lot right now about what it means to be a warm demander. And that's the term we're using about pairing all of our staff. Because you're right, it can't be, if you're struggling, we're going to go to the counselor for that may or may not be available to you. But this idea that all of our staff need to both have high expectations for young people, clarity of expectation, but also know to be nurturing, warm to young people. We can be, it's the sort of the new way of saying tough love, and I think we're talking about how do we strike that right balance? How do we coach and develop people around that? We know we're going to have a lot of new educators, just because there's a lot of churn in the profession right now. So we're really developing our coaches, and every building has coaches, to really focus on our newest educators around this notion of what it means to be a warm demander. I mean, we have a responsibility. Part of being an equitable institution is all kids need to be given a strong instructional experience. But to do that, you also have to know how to have the nurturing, supportive conversations with young people at the same time. And that, I think we've taken for granted that people know how to do that. I think, culturally, some of our staff are ready to do that, but many are not. They don't know what that means in a diverse community, but also, they either err on one side, like we have the screamers who just, they want to go right to the punitive with kids, or you have people that are what I call the pobrecito mentality, where we can't push kids because they're, they're too poor, they're too traumatized. We can't expect. Well, that to me is such a form of racism right there. Right? So how do we strike the right balance there? And so our training, and that's going to be our theme next year, and how we support, because that's what we think our kids need right now. I mean, I think they always need that, but I think our staff struggles, all educators struggle to find that balance and do that well. And we're getting that feedback from teachers is, and you've got to coach principals and school leaders on how to set the tone for their building. And then we've got to support our coaches to be able to work with our new teachers. And we think that that's the right entry point for our coaches, given the new staff.
No, that did answer my question. I want to ask you a little bit about absenteeism.
Yes.
And you talked a little bit about some cultural mismatches and challenges, misaligned expectations, difficulty really getting the engagement that you would want with the English language learner community. And one of the things that kind of stuck out to me as you were speaking is you talked a little bit about the idea of, our kids in a place that's interesting to them. Is there something happening here that they care about, essentially? And I think most parents know that, what your kids mostly care about when they go to school is their friends. And then after that, it's probably the teachers that they like, right? It's about the people. That's really what keeps them motivated and wanting to be in school. But some of it is about what they learn as well. And I'm interested in knowing more about how you are answering the demand for more sort of life skill and practical skill in school. I think it's pretty clear that the demand for vocational instruction in terms of career readiness is exploding. You can see that, right? That's coming from the parents. There's huge career opportunities out there. But one thing that I hear a lot from other parents and people that I speak to that I haven't seen coming along in the schools yet is likewise some of the skills that used to be taught, that financial management, that all of those things that contribute to you being ready to just live, not necessarily get a job, but sort of move through the world successfully. And I'm curious about how that is entering into your conversations as your goal setting going forward, because I think it's an important piece of not only engaging kids, but engaging their parents. I think when we are, and I've talked to you a little bit about this before, when you have a community of people who don't necessarily get what your school is about and aren't engaged with your school, if you can create the school as a community space and you can start to integrate some of their needs as families, then you start to build some cultural currency. You start to get people understanding, like, this is why it's important for my kid to be there, supporting them in that absenteeism. So I don't know, it's kind of a big question, but I think you get what I'm saying. How are you guys talking about those kinds of things? Are you talking about how you engage a parent who might have language barriers themselves and might be looking for a place of instruction? How do you bring more of that community need into the school space?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think it's important that we have conversations with our community about what are the kinds of things that they want. People want more and more people want choice. right? So kids want choice, families want choice, right? And how do we make sure that what we are offering aligns with what, how the community has defined quality? I think there needs to be a lot more conversations about that. When I talk about redesigning the way, or redefining success in schools, I think that's what I mean, especially around, we exist as part of a community. And those conversations need to be had regularly about, it can't be as an outsider coming in, defining what this community wants for its own children. And those are, I think we just have to, I've had the opportunity to sit around in conversations with different groups of parents, different demographics in Salem, and they want very different things for their kids in school. Doesn't mean that we can't offer them, right? But I think we have to put those out on the table and as a community own that there's a variety of what people want in school. Ultimately, I'll just say this: this is a very exciting school district because we are very reflective of what the real world looks like, right? We are, that's the real advantage. I don't think we take advantage of that asset enough, and helping kids navigate through, helping them understand and navigate and be able to negotiate, right, the spaces that they're in. I think that's among the best things we can give our young people as they leave the Salem Public Schools. They're getting, but I'm not sure. I know we have work to do to make sure that that's a healthy, safe, supportive environment for them, and so that they're leaving our school system ready to meaningfully engage beyond our school system. That's a long way of answering your question. So we are having conversations about that. Honestly, like I said before, I'm still wrestling with, how does school pivot? Teachers tell me they hate it, so I'm not going to use that word. They just told me that at my teacher advisory. So how do we shift in this moment in time? I asked them, what are the buzzwords that we use in education that you want us to pivot was number one. That word. So I just think that's something I want to hear from what all of you think. Many of you have kids in school. Many of you had kids in school. I think public education is like the healthcare industry needs to shift soon and urgently. Otherwise, we're going to lose a whole generation of kids, worse than pre-pandemic. So I don't mean to be gloom and doom, but I think that's just the reality of what we have to do.
Thank you. That was a great answer. And I don't think you're being doom and gloom. I agree completely. I think the education field is due for a massive reimagining. Certainly. And I do think it's really concerning. And I think parents realize that. I think everybody involved realizes that. So with that, I'm going to ask you, what are the greatest barriers that you feel like we face as a system at the state level, the federal level? What are our structural stumbling blocks? Because we as counselors don't write your budget, obviously, but one of the things we do get to do is advocate for our needs as a city. And knowing that there's a wholesale reimagining that needs to happen, we're going to have to, at some point start advocating for the things we want because we can't do it just as Salem. So what are those things when you're trying to innovate, but you're bumping up against layers upon layers of administration and standards? Where are you running into trouble?
It's easy for me to blame. It's a good question, but it's easy for me to blame the Department of Ed. There's some stuff there that makes things hard. Like there's some regulations around who can be and passing teacher tests to me is mind-numbing because it doesn't say anything about whether you can connect with kids, that you can pass a teacher test. I believe in having some standard, but I do think there needs to be more flexibility. There's some really good people in this system that not pass the test and are going to have a hard time being certified, but I would want a child in. That's just, so there's some of the regulatory stuff from the state level. I think, what I think the biggest barrier is the adults, right? All of us. We have a very fixed notion of what we think schools should be like. We all went to school and we all have nostalgia about what school was like. And I'm as guilty as anybody about, of that. But it's the reason why school has never really changed. It looks very much like we all experienced, right? And so I think one of the barriers is as adults, we need to suspend a lot of what we know about schedules and what classrooms look like, and what the school day needs to look like, and the activities and programs, where kids learn, what that looks like. I just think we as adults get stuck in that because it's what we experienced growing up, and we think fondly about it, even though when I really think about it, it wasn't that great then, and it's really not that great now for kids, right? It could be better. And so, but what I do think is exciting, and I will just say this, like we're in a moment in time where everybody is starting to get that this doesn't work. Unions, administration, the state, level, politicians, and parents. You're right. I think parents know more than ever that because of what's happened over the last two years, it's the crisis of what's happened with the pandemic. I think we can't let it go to waste because it is an opportunity to strike because people are more willing to suspend their,
Awesome. My very last question
Sure.
for you. This is probably most related to what's in front of us. You talked a little bit about sort of strategic planning, needing to do a better job of allocating resources where you need them. So can you go into a little bit more detail about that? Tell us where priorities are being realigned, where resources are shifting from and to within the school budget, and what is really going to be the focus of the pool?
I think we have to, I want to better delve into, our resources going to where the needs are greatest in the school system, right? So like, if we look at all of our schools and how we allocate based on low-income students, I think we should be strategic about making sure exist. That's, true financial equity, right? So that's one thing. I also think we do have some right sizing to do. I'm not saying we have too many resources. I certainly won't say that to the city council that we have too many resources, but which we don't. No, I didn't say that. I think there's a way though that, as our enrollment starts to shift, I think there are places that I would look to invest more in because we've just assumed that we're going to have this many classrooms at every grade level or school. But then where's the demand right now? So we started doing that when we looked at what vocational demand was. So we did some lateral shifts in this budget this year where, we we shifted positions to CTE. So didn't mean that we just added more. We just made some lateral moves in terms of we didn't need as many math teachers. When we were able, through attrition, we were able to eliminate that, then add a position in CT where the it's higher. I think we have to do more of that and being responsive to the surveys we give. Right now, the surveys we give to kids, that's not public. I'd like ultimately it to be public so you can see what kids are saying they want more of in school. Those are examples of how I think resources should be allocated strategically rather than just say, we're going to run this program because it's run for, 30 years. At Salem High, we just have to run it when kids may not be interested in that. And we have kids enrolled. We have a huge waiting list of young people that are culinary, as an example. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, President Marcillo. It's more of a comment than a question. To follow up on what is being discussed, and another important piece of the puzzle is trying to foster the public health of our residents. That's always important with the challenges that families can face with food insecurity, housing insecurity. That stress can make it really challenging, to focus on schoolwork. And it also affects attendance. And I do appreciate the efforts that have been made by the city and a lot of our community members. Even just the efforts, for food insecurity. I know there's a distribution now at the high school, which is great, and the efforts in the schools and healthy eating and, Yeah, I think a continued effort to support our residents and continuing to enhance that. And you also talked about more outreach that the schools are doing for family assistance. I think that all really will contribute to the students thriving and attendance. And I appreciate the focus that's being done by you in the schools and the city as well. Thank you.
Any other questions? Council McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to put a different perspective on it. I'm going to pivot. And
The Celtics pivot tonight.
no, not the Celtics pivot. Hopefully they will be able to do that without twisting an ankle. I am the parent of two school-age children that graduated from Salem High School, that attended Salem Public Schools K-1 all the way through. I am an advocate for Salem Public Schools. I believe that if you are engaged as a child and as a parent and take full advantage of the opportunities that are presented with you, you can receive a quality education from Salem High School. I truly believe that. I have my oldest son would have excelled anywhere. He has a brilliant mind, but he wanted to go to Salem High School because that's where his friends were going and because he wanted to take full advantage of the music program. And he used that advantage of the music program to be a 5 or 6 year member of the Salem High School marching band and went on to UMass Amherst and became a 4-year member of the UMass marching band, of which we went and saw him march in the Rose Bowl parade, which just speaks volumes of what extracurriculars can do for an individual to provide them with different opportunities. Going to what Council Varela said earlier and what you said about engaging these kids in middle school, because I can't even imagine being a school administrator or a teacher during the last 2 years and trying to engage children via Zoom or whatever other means in order to get them to learn and to get them to stay engaged. And the ability or lack of ability to allow them to be engaged in extracurriculars on top of that, it must have been extremely difficult. But that being said, I've been here a while, and I was also a member of the turnaround committee for the Salem High School when that lovely MCAS test made us level 4, and we were deemed we had to come up with a strategic plan. And one of the things I advocated for in that plan is Salem High School is part of the mission statement. Salem High School has to teach you and prepare you for life. Because even back then, as my mother will tell you to this day, her son was going to college, even though my father was a contractor and I grew up in the business and I wanted to go to work in the trades. But God loved my mother. She did the right thing and she advocated for me, and I ended up going to college. I graduated, and soon thereafter I went back to work in the trades. But I did receive my education, and it's something that no one can ever take away from me. But in the same sense, the different opportunities that we need to provide and give options to our kids, because I think it's becoming more relevant today, especially when you talk about decreased class sizes due to just not so much kids leaving the district, but just because of, parents making choices not to have as many kids over the course of years. You're seeing it not just in Salem, you're seeing it in a lot of districts, and even when also now seeing it at the college level, because these, the lack of students in the school age is also translating into colleges, and colleges have, looking for more of these kids. But how part of all of that is to engage at the middle school level. I'm going to look back to when I was in middle school, which is a lifetime ago. Back where we every quarter when I was either 7th or 8th grade, 7th grade, I think. Each quarter we took a shop class. One was drafting, one was metal class, one was wood class, and one was printing, which would obviously those would have to be tweaked, but each quarter that was a mandatory class. It was shop. So try to engage kids, give kids options, also give them some basic life skills, because I think that all comes down to it too. as Councilor McLean said, it was, even like how to balance a checkbook. I'm still trying to explain to my child how to balance a checkbook. He just goes to the end and looks at the balance at the end of the month and figures out what he has. But different opportunities. But when I saw your presentation was excellent. And when I looked at the presentation and you hit one of the things that my wife used to hammer home to me as we would go to every single parent-teacher conference. And I kept looking at my wife and I said, our kids are doing extremely well. The teachers know they're doing well. I was very fortunate that both my kids did very well. And we went to every single parent-teacher conference. My wife looked at me and says, get in the car, we're going to support the teachers. Because the teachers need to know that the parents support them in their efforts on how they are educating our children. Because it's the biggest task that they have is to educate our children. We send them off to school. We trust that you are going to put together a team that's going to educate our kids. But the same point is, how do we engage the parents that don't look at it that way, that don't look at you have to go to a parent-teachers night to support the teacher and find out what you can be doing to help your child to thrive. And I think that's where the disconnect is, because your numbers bear it out, is how do you engage the marginalized populations that for whatever reason do not want to come to a parent-teacher conference. And have you noticed that during, with Zoom, has the engagement been a little better because of Zoom?
It's been better, yeah. It has been.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard for people to get to school all the time.
Yep.
If you judge me on how often I'm in school, I'm in Salem a lot. Zoom allows me to do the things I wouldn't be able to as a parent. Well, so yeah, I think that's right. And I think most parents, I find very few parents who don't want to be engaged, right? But remember, some of our parents didn't have good experiences in school, whether that was in Salem or wherever they were growing up. And so there's a lot of skepticism about the institution of school that, we have work to do to bridge. Can I just touch on one thing you said too? I really appreciate the shout out to our teachers and our staff. I think you're absolutely right. I have to say, Salem is very lucky to have the people that do work on behalf of our kids. We have amazing educators. They're by nature more flexible than what I see in other districts. I think that's sort of the culture here. I've never seen people work more tirelessly than I have over the last two years. I'm proud to be associated with the staff here. And I'll also say, especially as more and more people get to work from home, our staff doesn't get a break. I can shut the door of my office, during the school day if I want to, but the majority of our staff, they're on all day long from the moment they get in. And while other people, are, working from home and, do laundry during the day, our people are, gone to the day. I don't ever want to see people say teachers have the summer off, because I challenge anybody to be in a classroom all day during this pandemic. But you should all be very proud of the educators in the Salem.
I think I can't speak for everybody. I'll speak for myself. I am, because of what they did for my kids. I mean, one question I would have is, do we still use the iParent system?
We don't use iParent. We use, I guess that's Aspen now. Is that right, Ms. Manning? Yeah, iParent was we use Aspen.
The iParent came out when my kids were in high school, and I loved it because, like I said, I'm very fortunate to have 2 great kids, and one was head and shoulders. The other one was just below head and shoulders. But the other one, if you could go on iParent and find out where he was supposed to be doing, because he'd be the one to tell you, oh, yeah, Dad, I did my homework. Really? It says here that you have an assignment due tomorrow. Shouldn't you be doing that right now? So I felt that was a useful tool for some, could be a useful tool for some parents, and I know. But like I said, my kids have graduated a bunch of years ago. But I was also very excited to see that you offered the ability to take classes at the Salem State 4 credits. I don't think that existed when my kids were in school, but they did take advantage of the AP classes, and it was fabulous. And I can't, anyone who will tell me, I said, if your kid started in the Salem Public Schools at K1 and went all the way through 12, and you stayed engaged, the teachers will do a fabulous job, and you'll be fine. as long as you stay, you have to stay on top of your kids, and they have to stay on top of the work. So once again, a great presentation tonight, and all our best to the staff, because really I jokingly use the word pivot, but they changed, or they adapted, and they overcame midstream, as a lot of us had to. But head and shoulders, what their efforts was unbelievable. Because, like I said, I don't think as a parent, if now with what happened in the last 2 years, I don't know if my wife and I could have gotten through it. I'm sure she would have, because she would have figured it out. But I mean, to teach the kids at home, have them at home, lessons at home, all of what they had to do was just to keep them engaged. But how do we now deal with all those other things that we would never, like you said 5 years ago, with the mental issues and the health issues? It's just, it's just another level to it. And I think that, the Salem Public School System will adapt and overcome and to do what's right for our kids. So, thank you.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Council President Marcello. Dr. Strike, I have one more thing I feel sort of compelled to say, and it might turn into a question, but I'm not sure where I'm going yet. I think that, we talk about equity in our public school system and how we address incredibly important issues around race and all various kinds of cultural backgrounds and even, maybe class backgrounds as well. And I wonder how that conversation includes the teaching of owning your privilege. So I sit here as a cis-normative white woman who's raising a relatively athletically built white boy child who, presents as a cisgendered boy child. And we talk a lot at home about the privilege he bears, especially with regards to showing up as an upstander in hard situations, which is incredibly difficult for kids, especially as a 10-year-old, But I think that it would be remiss of us to talk about equity with only the lens of, let's look at those who deserve to be elevated, right? Whose voices we need to be listening to and our hard history. I think it would be remiss to not teach that. To teach that and not teach that there is a flip side to that coin, which is like, the way you are treated, you may be treated in the world differently, right? Part of this inequity is about knowing what privilege you bear. And I wonder if you have any thoughts around how to do that in a way that is sensitive and compassionate and age appropriate, and if that's a part of your equity teaching.
Yeah, you have tips for me as a parent too. That's right on. I think, look, I don't believe that these need to be divisive conversations.
Right.
I have a responsibility to every child that goes through this school system, and I want whoever's doing well to do better.
Right.
We've got to figure out a way to accelerate every child wherever they are. But I do think that that's part of how Lev's question about how do we also support our teachers. Those are hard conversations for teachers to skillfully manage, and that is part of the discussion and the work we're doing with our partner. The equity imperative is our conversation about what privilege really is. I think many of our teachers are anxious about having those conversations, not because there isn't a will to do it, but how to do it in a way that's respectful.
Yeah.
And I'm not really interested in creating divisiveness as a community. I don't believe that that's how we move forward. I think there's a way to teach a very nuanced and diverse perspective. Like history needs to be taught a little differently than historically. But I think our kids are better apt. In my conversations with young people, I'm surprised. I shouldn't say. I'm always marvel at how open they are to these conversations and more aware than adults are. It's just that the adults need more skill in how to facilitate those conversations. So I think that's especially in a district that has, we have everything in our district, we have every socioeconomic level, every racial background, religious background, all sort of family constellations. We've got to, that's on the adults to be able to have those conversations more thoughtfully. And that takes work. And that is some of the conversations we're having through our, through the partnership we have.
Dr. Zrike, I wonder if I may to offer, maybe the frame is about good allyship. Maybe it's about how you use your position to elevate the voices of others. I don't know, just an offer. Let me just say for everyone listening at home, I know it's an incredibly complicated and nuanced conversation, but I think that
that's a good way to
good allyship, right, is multi-directional and self-aware. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Dr. Zrike. I will say my two children also graduated from Salem High School back in 2010 and 2012, and I think Council McCarthy and I were on the same district or school improvement plan group. Lots of hours spent there. So, I mean, I can't say enough about the Salem Public Schools, especially the music department. My daughter is in music right now. My other son is in auto racing, so go figure. So seeing no other questions, I will take a motion. Councilor McCarthy. Can we send this back to the council first to receive and file?
I'd make a motion that this matter be sent back to the city council and received and filed.
Councilor McCarthy moves that this be sent back to the city council and receive and file. Second, Councilor Watson-Felt. All those in favor?
Let the record reflect that Councilor Merkel and Councilor Dominguez have their hands up.
Thank you. So the motion carries. One last motion. Councilor McCarthy.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much.